Hello dosto, this is Vishakha Daga coming up with next round of New Simplified. Now when Corona happened, most of the sectors of society were impacted. That include industry. And that's why various indicators that are coming into being are talking about how industrial growth is impacted and still impacted by the repercussions of the Corona. Here in the series, it is Index of Industrial Production, which is released recently. So in this video, we will discuss about IIP. But along with that, we will discuss how Index of Industrial Production is different from the Index of 8 core industry, which also sometimes in news, and sometimes you confuse IIP with ICI. So in this video, we will discuss the IIP in detail, and then we will differentiate in between the two indicators. Now let's just move ahead and try to actually understand this entire IIP thing first. First of all, we'll understand why IIP was in news. IIP was in news because recently IIP data, that is Index of Industrial Production data, was released, which shows that industrial growth in India have not revived. In fact, the revival is very slow. In terms of it shows that the recovery is only 0.4%. And to the extent, you can hope that, entire industry may grow somehow even at 4.4%, but the manufacturing is not even recovering. It has instead shrink by 0.1%. So negative growth is being witnessed in manufacturing sector, which is a matter of concern for India. This is a greater matter of concern from India, especially provided when we are saying in the budget a target was set up for 8%. So here we are setting a budget target for 8% in the next economic year to grow. On the other hand, industry is actually having an economic growth of only 0.4% and negative growth rate of manufacturing of -1%, which is a matter of concern for India. Now, before understanding what is the concern, etc., which we need to see in the upcoming year, let's understand what is IIP. That is Index of Industrial Production. Why is it important? Now, Index of Industrial Production, is it like an index? Index means which measures something and shows the data to you so that you can actually assess how much is the growth rate. So this is what this index does. Index of Industrial Production. That means it attempts to measure the growth of the various industrial sector. Primary sector, tertiary sector, secondary, your secondary sector, and other kind of various division of industry. So it tries to measure the growth of industry. Now, how actually does it do it? So this is the aim, to measure the growth of industry. The way it is done, now let's understand the mechanism. To understand the mechanism, what it does, it measures the change in volume. Now, whenever we want to see the growth, we see a change. We measure the change. Like per se, earlier you were actually producing 100 unit. Now, in 2021, you started producing 110 unit. Now, in such a case, there will be a change of 10 unit, which is actually positive growth. So you can say there is a 10% growth rate in the industry, right? So I measured on the basis of unit of anything. It could be money, it could be anything. Here the unit is volume actually. They are measuring the change in the volume, change in volume of production over the given time period and the basket. Time period is usually 6 months or 1 year in here. So over a given time period and then with the given basket, the change is being measured. Given basket in terms of they will take out, see the growth of cement industry, see the growth of refined industry, see the growth of coal and etc. So basket is fixed. On the basis of this, the growth is being seen in IIP. Because even if the basket keeps changing, then you may not be able to measure the accurate growth rate. Because earlier you were measuring for 100 items. Next year, since the number of items have grown with the discovery of artificial intelligence and other goods, now the items will be 110. So you will measure the unit change in 110. However, this is not an accurate measurement because the base year does not account for same number of items. That's why basket is fixed and so is the time period. Okay, next. Understanding what are the sectors that are actually measured in the sector, in this actually index. These are mining, manufacturing, electricity, refining, and steel, etc. Now, for your own sake, or for actually the simplification of the index, the entire industry is divided into 3 times. The basic good, the capital good, and the intermediate good. Basic goods are those goods which are consumed by the consumer. So these are very basic and often used for the consumer consumption. Capital goods are those goods which are used in factory, right? For the greater production of more items, like sewing machine is there, or any other kind of like pulping machinery is being set up. These are capital goods. So I try to measure all these kind of basic capital and intermediate goods. That means in between the raw item and finished good. Like you have a cotton as a raw item and shirt as a final good. In between, there must be a cotton swan with you, जिसे हम कॉटन की थान भी कहते हैं, वो भी हो सकती है, and that is something you consider as an intermediate good. So I try to measure all of this, and then it actually come up with a calculation. Now let's move ahead and understand the other technicalities of the IIP. Is that who actually come up with IIP, which ministry come up with the index. This is where you're going to differentiate in between IIP and ICI. That is Index of Industrial Production is different from Index of 8 Core Industry. First of all, we need to understand what are 8 core industry. Now, 8 core industry include these 8 industry. That is refinery, electricity, steel, coal, crude oil, and natural gas. Remember, the maximum contribution in this is of refinery, and the minimum contribution is of fertilizer. Okay, this is you must keep in mind. And I can give you an actual trick to remember this. Just look at this. In the entire scheme or the entire list of the sectors that are in front of you, most of them are coal, crude oil, and natural gas. The 3 items are of this, and they need to be refined regularly. If 3 items are like to be refined, that means a greater refinery is to be required. 3 items to be refined, that means the refinery should be the biggest sector, because one entire third, a greater portion is going to the refinery. That's why refinery constitute the greatest, the sector of all, which has the greatest amount of volume to be done. Now, what you done with these 3, coal, crude oil, and natural gas? Naturally, these things are used to generate electricity and other things as well. Electricity constitutes the greatest part. That's why after refinery, electricity becomes the second most important sector for you. Then later on comes a steel. That is something you need to remember because the construction is a very good large sector. Refinery, electricity, steel. Then comes 3 products from which we started. That is coal, crude oil, and natural gas. Remember, in case of coal, coal is important because just remember, coal was invented way before natural gas and crude oil. That's why we have the greatest amount of coal on the earth. Then we have liquid form, that is petroleum available. We discovered petroleum some time while ago, but the most recent discovery is natural gas, and yet we are not able to allocate the maximum number of it. That's why remember it in this series: coal, crude oil, and natural gas. The sequence of its discovery. Then comes cement, because steel and cement have a greater role in infrastructure, and least come here fertilizer. That's how you're going to remember the 8 core industry. Now this constitutes the 8 core industry. Once you've understood this, remember in IIP, if the 100 of all things, 8 core industry constitute the 40% of the weight of the IIP. IIP is made up of 40% of 8 core industry. Rest 60% is to other industry like education and etc. But the 8 core industry constitute only 40% of the index. On the other hand, the second index, that is your index of the 8 core industry, this is entirely consisting of this 8 core industry only. ICIs is 100% made up of only these 8 core industry. On the other hand, for IIP, only 40% weightage goes to this. Second most important difference you will keep in mind is that who is releasing this index? Now, when IIP was first introduced in India, it was in 1935, and it was calculated by Office of Economic Advisor under Ministry of Commerce. But later on, this function was taken in 1951 by the CSO, which later became NSSO in 2019, with the merging of CSO with the NSSO. Then it became NSO. So, Ministry of Statistics and Planning actually, MOSP. NSO is actually coming up with the index of IIP. So here the ministry is, or the body is your NSO. On the other hand, index of 8 core industry is still released by Office of Economic Advisor, Ministry of Commerce, DPIIT. Right? Keep this in mind. IPI is being calculated by NSO, Ministry of Commerce. On the other hand, here your ICI, so IIP, NSO, and ICI is being calculated by DPIIT. One more thing you'll like a technical term you'll remember in here. The base year for IIP was 1993 to 1994, few years ago. However, this was recently changed to 2001 to 2012. So this is the base year for the IIP. So this was understanding the technicalities of the IIP and your IIT, your ICICI. Now just keep in mind, what is the significance of this? Its significance is that it is actually required by various agencies like RBI to estimate the GDP growth, to actually account the current growth rate, to come up with a monetary policy. It is needed by RBI, and so is the Ministry of Finance if it has to come up with various policies for the various sector like semiconductor, PLI for semiconductor, etc. So in hand, first it need to know what is the current growth rate scenario. And in this, IIP is of great value. Second is the government policy making. It is very helpful. As I said, if the government has to come up with budget and allocate money to different sector, at first it need to know what is the growth rate of different sector. Next, it is also helpful in economic estimation of various indicator. Like you cannot calculate GDP completely if you do not know what is the current industrial growth rate in volume of production. That's why this IIP is very important. So with this, we are done with the IIP estimation, the current news of the IIP, and we have differentiated in between the IIP and ICICI. I hope this video was useful to you. If that is the case, you need to like and subscribe the video. If not, put your doubts in the comment section. Thank you so much.
Current Affairs by ForumIAS is an all-in-one program that covers the dynamic aspect of the syllabus from both prelims and mains perspective. Last year, we have helped more than 100 students crack IAS with our current affairs classes.